It's another episode of Sharkey's Treehouse. Thanks for checking in. Let me ask you a question. Can you have rock and roll without a guitar? Hell no. What about the blues? Shit. Country? Do cowboys drive pickup trucks? So it's hard to imagine any kind of pop music without the iconic sound of the guitar. In this episode, the custom boutique guitar maker. How can they compete with the big boys like Fender, Gibson, Taylor, Martin? What about the quality? To answer those questions and many more, we catch up with Grzebik. Barry's a product designer, acoustician, and sound designer by profession with Grez-bick Design Group, but he's also a skilled guitar maker, a luthier. He'll talk about how he makes his guitars, the styles, the wood, and how it all plays into the sound, the tone of his masterpieces. Archtops, hollow and semi-hollow bodies, solids, and acoustics. You'll get to hear some of them. In fact, that's one of them right now. You'll learn a little bit about the custom guitar industry and how it's booming. He'll also give us a tour of his wood shop and show us some of the tools he uses in there, including those that he acquired from the legendary guitar maker R.C. Allen. We caught up with Barry at his home and shop in Petaluma, California. Barry, thanks for letting me into your home here. This is awesome. I love it. Love it.
Appreciate you coming out.
Oh, my pleasure. You're here in Petaluma and the weather couldn't be better. Unbelievable. We got all this natural light coming in. Helps you build your guitars, I assume.
Yep. It's a good room, visually and sonically. It's actually a nice room to hang out and play a little acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
You got some good natural reverb. You probably hear that on the mics.
And a little bit of bass back there too, I see. Yeah. That thing's awesome, by the way. You hook that up to a thrash pedal.
That's just how it was intended to be used in 1950, something or other.
Sure.
Yeah,
nice thrash pedal, get it on there. Anyway, great to be here, thanks. Tell me a little bit about, first of all, about Grez Guitars. Before we get too far into anything else and, start pulling those skeletons out of the closet, because I know there's some, right? Tell me about how you got into building guitars. Tell me about Grez Guitars.
Yeah, so Grez Guitars started about 10 years ago. So it's kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of other things that I do for a living. And I built a guitar with the intention of building more. This wasn't just a hobby gone mad, but it was really something I sort of purposefully started looking for it to grow, never expecting it to be massive, of course, but definitely looking to have a small guitar company.
Yeah.
So started with that in mind. And but starting late in life, I didn't go through the normal process of becoming a guitar builder, the normal process being going to a luthier school or apprenticing under someone else, or both, really. So I started out by basically buying every book you could possibly find on the topic and reading each one 3 or 4 times. And that's about a year's worth of just intense studying. And then sooner or later, you got to cut some wood.
And you're self-studied. This is something that you did because you wanted to do it.
Exactly.
Not because someone made you do it.
No. This was just something that seemed like it would be fun and interesting and would be a way to make some money. Not that guitar building is a way to make a lot of money, but it's a very sort of prideful thing to do that makes money. And it's also something that doesn't have a time limit. It's not the sort of thing that you have to retire at 65. You can be 85 and toiling away in the shop a couple hours a day as an old man building guitars. And so part of it was looking forward to retirement. Is what do you do in retirement, right? You can't just sit around and watch TV. So if you're a guitar builder, you don't ever retire. You can just keep building guitars, and maybe the business scales back if I'm 80. But I got to do something, and I can build guitars.
And I can tell you, your wife wants you to do something in the shop out back, right?
That's right.
So you make her happy. You make yourself happy. You toil away from whatever honeydews she may have for you, and then you come away with this beautiful piece of artwork.
That's right.
And it's playable.
It's beautiful, and it makes other people happy. So here's the shop on the back of the property. It's an old horse barn that I converted into workspace.
Very cool. It doesn't look anything like a barn anymore.
Well, it's had a lot of work done on it, but Makes for a great space very close to the house. All right, so here's the shop, all exposed natural wood.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place to hang out.
Yeah, it smells like a wood shop. I love it. This is great.
Yeah, so come on in and let's look at some of the forms and tools.
This is great. I love this.
Yeah, I have a body and process here. This is for a 17-inch archtop guitar. Obviously, this is just the rim. And even though this is for an archtop guitar, this is really assembled the same way an acoustic guitar would be assembled. So you have a neck block and a tail block and very thin sides and what's called kerfing around the edges.
Here's the Mendocino, a semi-hollow body with a red wood top. When did you first pick up a guitar?
Oh, I'm a multi-time failed guitar player. I think I first picked up the guitar probably when I was 10 or 12, acoustic guitar lessons that didn't pan out, and then picked it up again as a teenager in high school and played for a while, and that didn't really pan out, and then picked it up again later in life. So I've kind of always been a guitar player.
Did you ever join a band?
Not much more than jamming with buddies at parties in high school. Yeah. Played at a wedding or a few other random events, but never really gigged as a musician.
Right.
Was never really that good.
So this was what, in the 80s?
Yeah, this would have been middle 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, in the middle 80s.
Man, there was a lot of weird kind of pop music going on then.
A lot of big hair and shredding guitar.
A lot of big hair, and yeah, in fact, some guitars made it big because of the shred.
Yep.
Back in the day. Grez guitars aren't necessarily designed for that.
No, slightly different customer base.
Yeah.
No, the Grez is kind of a modern take on vintage instruments. So most of my customers are already have an affinity for old archtop guitars or just vintage guitars in general. And sometimes either the vintage guitars don't have the features that they want, or they don't want to take that vintage guitar on the road. So one of the things that I do is I'm able to make something very vintage-like, but that has modern appointments and works right and plays properly and is exactly to someone's specs, but it kind of feels like an old instrument.
Tell me a little bit about whatever competition there might be out there from other people who make custom guitars on the same scale that you do. It seems like I've seen a lot of these kinds of custom guitar companies, if you will, small boutique shops that have popped up all over the place. They seem to be becoming more and more popular. Do you have competition, or do you look at it that way?
Well, there are a surprising number of builders right now. I think that most people in the industry would say that there is really a renaissance of guitar building right now. There are so many people doing it. So in that regard, I suppose there's competition, but I don't see it so much as competition because what I'm building is just unique enough that you either kind of dig what I'm doing or you don't. It's not like I'm building something similar to what somebody else is building and then you have to fight for the customer It's more that the customer either gravitates towards me or they don't.
No, I've noticed too that a lot of your guitars don't really take off from, let's say, a Les Paul. They don't really take away from necessarily the
Telecasters.
The Fender Strats, Tellies, and all that kind of thing.
All the usual suspects.
Right. They're a little different. They have sort of their own unique design to them, like the Mendocino, for example.
That's right. So every one of these things is from the ground up design. So none of them are copies of anything. They might be similar in some ways because it's still a guitar. It has to, certain ergonomics that have to happen. But I'm not really into making high-end replicas, let's say. And there are a lot of people who do really good business doing that. That's just not what gets me excited.
Right.
So everything I build has been designed by me from scratch. For some reason or other, in terms of getting the aesthetics the way I want it, or the feel, or the sound. It's not that the classics aren't great, right? Who doesn't like a Les Paul or a really good Telly? But from my standpoint, if you dig a Telly and you need a Telly, you go buy a Telly. You don't need me. So.
And not to mention the fact that yours aren't made in Taiwan, they're not made in Korea, they're not made in China, they're made right here in the good old US of A.
Petaluma, California.
Yeah, that's got to be a selling point. You have to have come across somebody who said, I love the fact that it's made here.
Not only is it made here, but some of the materials come from here, which is once in a while a selling feature as well. Up here in Northern California, this is redwood country, right? We have redwood forests, one of the few places in the world that has them. And back 100 years ago and further back, everything was made of redwood. Bridges, barns, churches, houses, everything. So I'm able to find redwood that's salvaged now, right, from an old barn coming down or a tunnel getting rebuilt. And so I can build a guitar for somebody that is not only made here in Sonoma County, but the materials potentially are from a tree that was harvested 120 years ago in Sonoma County.
You can't get more green than that.
Yeah. So it's reclaimed material and it's local. And a lot of times I can even tell you where it came from, which is kind of cool. I can say, look, your guitar was once a train tunnel or a wine tank, or it was a horse barn overlooking the beach out at Bodega Bay or whatever. But I mean, how cool is that, right? To know it's not only locally made, but the materials are local.
It's got a story.
Yep.
It has a story even before it becomes a guitar. The raw wood, the material, it's got a story. Come on.
No, it's really, if you're a guitar builder, you tend to have a wood habit. So I'm always buying wood. I'm always on the hunt for some cool board. You see a barn coming down, you talk to the folks. Oh, what's going on here? Mind if I pick to your wood?
You're the wood whisperer. Hey.
All right, so here's my wood stash. Mostly redwood over here. Lots of redwood.
Lots of redwood. That's yep.
Veneers over here.
Okay.
Things like, this is really beautiful.
Your bird's eye maple.
Bird's eye maple.
That's gorgeous.
This is a big enough sheet to actually do a one-piece back versus book matching.
More veneers.
More veneers. But
look at that.
The shimmer on that is just incredible. And that's a piece that you would choose because you love the way it looks.
Love that. And this, of course.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep, all the way down to the spalted maple on the end there.
That's right. Spalted, meaning it's like partially rotten, isn't
partially rotten, yeah. So it's actually diseased maple. And there's a point at which I believe where the disease has taken hold of the wood, but it hasn't fully rotted it, so it still has structural integrity.
Love it. This is
and you get these
gorgeous.
Weird lines, yeah. And again, under finish, that looks really amazing.
I bet this would make a great drum kit.
You know, there's a lot of similarities between the veneers I'm using and what you see in drums sometimes.
So now this, to me, is what's really interesting as well. This is what, your inlay material?
Inlay, and a lot of it is binding that goes around the perimeter. As a matter of fact, here's a body. That would be a good example if we just pull this out. There's a little channel routed around the edge here that this would then fit into. And you can see it's already been put on the F-holes here. And that serves a couple of purposes. It's decorative. But it also acts as a little bit of a bumper. So as you're banging this guitar around, you're less likely to have an impact cause a split in the top or something because it's going to hit this, what in this case is ABS plastic, although sometimes it's actually made from wood. But all of these are there's such a variety, I guess you could say, because it is decorative.
So when you go out looking for wood, what is it that you look for? Besides it maybe being redwood or a good deal, but tell me, what do you look for?
It's actually really hard to find the right piece because the wood that I'm using was, again, harvested and milled, say, 100 years ago. And back then it was just lumber. They were just taking a tree and tossing it into the sawmill and out came boards to build something. But for guitar building, we really want the wood to be quarter sawn. So when you look at the end of the board, you see all the grain lines running perfectly vertical. Yeah. That's generally what you want. And so if you think about chopping up a big round log, even if you don't think about it, there will be 4 boards that come out of that log that have perfectly quarter sawn grain, just by random, right? But then, so 100 years later, what are the chances of me finding one of those 4 boards out of that huge log? And when it does come out of the building, that it isn't rotten and torn up, it's still structurally sound. And so a lot of times you find this huge pile of redwood and you dig through it and there's not a single suitable piece. So not only does it have to be well quartered, but it also needs to be big enough too. There's certain dimensions we need for a guitar. If it's an acoustic guitar or a semi-hollow body, you tend to have a book-matched top, right? So you take a board and you slice that board right down the middle and you open it up and you book-match it. So a 16-inch guitar means you need at least an 8-inch wide board, which is still pretty big. And then for a lot of the solid bodies or some of the small semi-hollow bodies I build, I use a one-piece board. So now I need to find a board that's 13¼ inches wide or wider, which seems crazy, but back then they did make lumber that big.
So that's when they're talking about a solid top. Is that what they're talking about?
A solid top, sometimes if you really get sort of geeky about it, people will talk about how many boards make up their guitar. Like when you look at an inexpensive guitar really carefully under the finish, you might find that they've taken 4 little strips of wood and glued them together to make a guitar. Yeah. A better guitar might be only made of 2 pieces of wood. A really good guitar might be made from 1 really big board, but as these boards get bigger, they become fewer and farther between, so they become more expensive. So you can get small boards cheap, glue them up, make a body, build a guitar in China.
There you go. Is there a particular wood that you like for its tone more than any other?
Well, yeah, we're just stuck on redwood, aren't we? Yeah. The most common woods for these kind of instruments that I'm building are mahogany, traditionally Honduran mahogany, but sometimes African mahogany is sneaking in now just because Honduran's getting hard to get. So mahogany and maples of various sorts, some rosewoods, ebonies, spruce, and redwood.
Okay.
And spruce, a softwood like spruce is of course always the top, and redwood is the local substitute, right? So I could put any place you see spruce on an instrument, it could be redwood. And I do build with spruce. It's not always redwood because redwood does have an aesthetic, which doesn't always fit what the customer wants or what the application wants, even though it has a sound. You can't make all your choices based on, well, this is the best wood. Because sometimes you want just a big, bright sunburst sprayed on a guitar, and redwood's kind of brown, and it doesn't really sunburst very well. You need a lighter palette behind the color.
Right, makes sense.
So sometimes it's spruce, sometimes it's redwood, but redwood's the choice. That's what I really love.
So what does it take to be a good guitar maker?
Patience. Lots of patience. Yeah, this is not an instant gratification kind of field. I mean, it like a minimum of 40 hours, sometimes 120 hours to make an instrument, depending on what it is, and that's not consecutive hours. There's a lot of glue this, put it aside, come back in a couple hours, glue it again. So you start on something and you might not have a finished result for 3 months.
Here again is the Mendocino.
You want to talk about hillbilly. This looks very hillbilly.
Homemade. This belonged to R.C. Allen. This is his press that he used to build guitars.
Very famous.
Yeah, he built guitars for Milt Travis and all sorts of other guys back in that era. He apprenticed under Paul Bigsby. Maybe apprentice is too strong of a word. He hung out in Paul Bigsby's shop.
Okay.
So
they had beers together or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what this is a positive and negative of an archtop guitar. And so if I fold this open, actually I do have a top in here that already has pickups and F-holes cut. But that is 5 layers of those thin, very flexible veneers with some glue and some pressure and some time.
And it has that arch.
That's right. And
shape to it.
And it comes from this form.
Right.
Now to make this really work, those veneers go in, And you can see I've got some extra layers that go on top just to distribute the weight. And then literally a bottle jack goes on here.
Oh.
And when you jack up that bottle jack, it eventually contacts the top. And if you keep jacking, it forces everything down.
And you've got to press.
And then you got to press. So it's a homemade press with a 2-ton bottle jack, and
That's incredible.
and it works just fine. Here's the crazy big sandpaper, right? 36 grit paper.
God.
And that eats wood, right? So I can actually use this sander almost as a planer. Then I start working on a neck, and I guess I've got a few necks hanging around. There's one right here. Different necks.
A few necks hanging around. Normally that wouldn't be a good thing.
Yeah. So the necks are, this happens to be a piece of a one-piece, big old chunk of Honduran mahogany carved into a neck. It looks a little crude right now, right, because it's just been rough sawn out. With an ebony fretboard and mother-of-pearl dots. And it already has the head plate on with the logo.
What is this area then?
Yeah, so spray booth. So I am spraying finishes here. Everything from solid colors to sunbursts to just straight clear lacquer finishes. And this is a Mendocino that has a figured redwood top, sort of a one-off custom. When I find a really sort of unique, interesting piece of wood, I'll just use it.
Were you good in wood shop? Did you ever take wood shopping?
Once in junior high, and I did enjoy it.
Did
you? Yeah.
Did you make the birdhouse?
I made a
bread
really,
box?
No,
What did you
a
make?
really ugly book, wall-hanging bookshelf, I think, that I kept around way too long until my wife made me throw it away.
So how did you go from that to building these beautiful guitars and be successful at it?
Well, the first few weren't as beautiful as I would like in retrospect.
Okay.
The very first guitar I built, it was an acoustic guitar, and it sounded and played quite nice, which was great. And I thought it looked great. And my sister-in-law has that guitar now. Gave it to her for Christmas. Every once in a while I see that guitar, and when I look at it now, I think, oh, I thought that was great, huh? But that's sort of the way it goes. So it evolves. You don't build an unbelievable guitar your first time out. But by number 20, by 30, 40, eventually you start honing some skills.
For sure. Do you have the hands of a surgeon to do some of the delicate work?
Yeah, that is something that I don't know if you can learn it. You either have it or you don't. Fine hand motor skills, working with both hands, sort of being ambidextrous.
Yeah.
Because you're chiseling on something from this direction and the grain doesn't agree. You've got to be able to switch hands, and it's just there's a lot of fine motor skills that maybe you either have or you don't. I don't know, but apparently I have.
For me, it would be the patience thing.
Yeah.
I don't think I could really do that, because anything that has to deal with real intricate kind of work, and
Yeah.
my granddad had a wood shop when I was a kid, and I used to go into the wood shop a lot, but again, I was impatient. I wanted to see this thing come to fruition in one day when I knew it was going to take longer, but it drove me crazy.
It's exciting. You want to see the finished product,
Yeah.
and the worst is when something doesn't go right and you have to backtrack. Right, that's because there's certain standards you have to meet, and you're putting some binding on, you're doing whatever, and it doesn't come out like it should, and you've got to route it off, sand it off, rip it off, and do it again.
So are you getting better at that, where you have fewer instances of backing?
Two steps forward and one step back happens all the time. Hopefully it just happens less and less.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
But it still happens. There's all sorts of crazy things that happen. Sometimes being a really good guitar builder, and certainly other guitar builders will understand this, is about hiding your mistakes, fixing your mistakes, right? Because things go wrong all the time. It doesn't. You don't just make it perfect. You make it as perfect as you can, which means, this little nick here. Well, we're just going to change the shape a little bit. We're going to sand it a little more, and now the nick is gone, and that shape looks pretty too, and voila, done.
Listen to the warmth of this archtop.
Have you ever gotten so far into a guitar and then you realize, let's throw it out? Has that ever happened? Where you've gotten...
No, usually that ends up being the shop demo guitar.
Oh, okay.
You know, if you're that far into it and then you find that there's a flaw, there's a crack, and there's some... Usually it's not, if it's not saleable, but it's a perfectly good guitar, that's the one you'll see when you do the tour of the shop that you get that hangs around here, and I lend out to people for demos, and it gets beat up, and yeah.
Tell me about how Namm went. You just got back from Namm a couple of weeks ago.
I did, yeah.
How'd it go?
It was really incredible. Yeah, so this was Winter Namm down in LA. At Summer Namm in Nashville, I have a small booth. Winter Namm is so huge that if I had a small booth there, I would just be lost in the chaos. It's really a waste of money for a tiny builder, in my opinion. So what I do instead is I sponsor a bunch of concerts and clinics. So I get together with some buddies, a lot of professional musicians, and we put together a couple of concerts, and everyone's playing Grez guitars, and everyone just has a ball. It's basically like a big jam with an audience.
Tell me about the magazine article that was recently done.
2 of them, actually.
Oh,
yeah,
2.
Yeah, 2 really, really good reviews. One in Guitar Player magazine and one in Premier Guitar magazine. And
they were kind.
They seem to like it. Yeah, and that was the Mendocino specifically. Yeah, the one instrument that's more of a production guitar versus the custom builds that I do. And that helped a lot in that, again, same sort of issue in terms of getting people to feel comfortable that this is legitimate. Like a lot of times I find that for me the sales cycle is almost a year long, because sometimes people don't even know who Grez Guitars is.
Right.
They stumble across me on the internet because they saw a friend of theirs or a musician playing one, and then that plants the seed. And then 6 months later they see this article in the magazine, and then 6 months later they're Googling guitars and remembering, so it all just kind of adds up to build interest. And some people will just see it and buy it. They're like, wow, that's cool, I want one.
Yeah.
But not everyone is quite so fast to make the leap.
Right. What does it feel like to have praise placed upon your Mendocino and others?
Oh, it's I guess it's hard to say. I mean, obviously it feels wonderful, but the biggest thing to say is it makes it feel worth it. Because it's a lot of work to make these, to design these. There's a lot of, I suppose, risk in terms of time invested and financial risk trying to make these. And again, this isn't an instant gratification thing. So you conceive, it could be 6 months from the time you conceive of a thing and you get some wood and you make a guitar, and then somebody finally says, this is pretty good. But you've gone maybe a long time saying, oh, I like it, but is anybody else gonna like it? So it
feels good.
Yeah, validation, I guess.
All right, very
cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this one and learned a little bit about custom guitars. There are more and more of these boutique shops popping up every year, so if you're in the market for a new guitar, give the independent artisan a try. Imagine owning a guitar that had a story long before it ever became the instrument sitting in your hands. I have more information about Grez Guitars in the notes for this podcast, as well as links, photos, and the exclusive video version of this podcast at sharkey's.treehouse.com. You'll get to see all of these beautiful instruments in the shop where Barry crafts them. I'd love for you to subscribe to Sharkey's Treehouse wherever you get your podcasts, at my website as well, sharkey's.treehouse.com. If you have a band or know of one that you'd like me to have on Sharkey's Treehouse to profile them and let them show their stuff, let me know. Hit me up in the social sphere or email me through my website. I'll post a new episode of Sharkey's Treehouse every 2 weeks, give or take, and I appreciate, again, you the listener, for taking the time to check us out. I'm Sharkey, and I'll see you right back here real soon.